It's a pleasure to be with you at the CTIA 5G Summit. I'm Brendan Carr, one of the commissioners at the Federal Communications Commission. A year ago, much of this same group was together at the Mobile World Congress in Los Angeles. I miss being able to meet with all of you, technologists and entrepreneurs in person, to see what's next in wireless. And I really miss getting to sit down with everyday Americans to hear how this industry's inventions are improving their lives. I'm confident we'll get back to normal in the not too much distant future. But for now, turn up the heat, put on some sandals, and we can all imagine that we're back in LA. In the wireless world, this fall's big news is the 5G upgrade. This has been in the works for a while. We've been planning for and building out 5G for quite some time. In fact, in 2018, a Houston couple became the first 5G customers in the world with a millimeter wave gigabit connection right to their home. Since then, 5G has provided another choice for in-home broadband to dozens of communities, and providers have extended 5G's coverage nationwide by upgrading their low-band signals. This month's 5G handset announcements, however, portend something different. They promise to bring 5G access to a much larger audience than has ever experienced 5G before. It's likely by the end of the holiday season, millions of Americans will have phones in their hands that are capable of handling hundreds of megabits per second on the move. This is performance on the go that few people have ever experienced. It has the chance to change people's perception of wireless and create a virtuous cycle. Upgraded handsets that feed demand for new apps and use cases, that feeds investment in more network upgrades, that feeds the cycle again. It's the moment when 5G goes mainstream. Now, that's really exciting news for the wireless industry, of course. And it should be exciting for everyday Americans because of the experiences to come. We all remember how the combination of nationwide 4G LTE coverage and handsets changed music, video, how it enabled ride sharing and social media. Can you imagine Instagram or Uber or FaceTime without LTE? 3G versions of those services, if possible at all, would have been frustrating and niche. We don't know yet what 5G's killer app will be. And as satisfying as it is to blow away friends with screenshots from speed tests, I don't think that's going to be the limit of what we can do with 5G. All I can say with certainty is that we'll look back a few years from now, perhaps through the lens of some 5G-powered AR glasses, and marvel at how our primitive wireless lives were without these new 5G capabilities. As we come to this turning point for 5G, I think it's worth taking stock of how we got here and what lessons history can teach us about serving our constituents and customers. I'll begin with inputs that make 5G happen: spectrum, infrastructure, and of course the people who build and upgrade our towers and physical infrastructure. The spectrum story is straightforward. Over the last 3 or 4 years, the FCC has been relentless in pushing into the marketplace gigahertz after gigahertz of spectrum. In 2017, we began preparing for a high-band auction that we just concluded at the start of this year. That auction of the 37, 39, and 47 gigahertz bands was the largest in history, making available 3.4 gigahertz of spectrum for the private sector. Next, we turned to the midband, where the challenge was to free up spectrum where it had been underused. At 2.5 gigahertz, we modernized our licensing rules to offer spectrum where it was previously stranded and couldn't be used at all. And just to step up the spectrum chart, the Commission is on its way to freeing up over 500 megahertz of midband. We're on track to auction the lower part of the C-band 2 months from now. As anyone involved in that knows, that was a complex puzzle to solve, which involved incenting satellite users to clear the band while paying for equipment upgrades and fairly compensating America's taxpayers. Adjacent to the C-band is CBRS. We pioneered a dynamic spectrum sharing framework to accommodate wireless unlicensed users and incumbent Department of Defense installations. And below CBRS, we announced just last month promising progress on opening up 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz to the private sector. And on top of all of that is the work that we've done in the lower bands. New commitments to build out AWS-4 at 2 gigahertz, new private sector use at 1500 and 1700 megahertz, and updated use of 900 megahertz to name just a few bands. To make use of all of that spectrum, you need steel and silicon. Building out 5G is what I've spent the bulk of my time on at the FCC as we've pressed ahead on a wireless infrastructure agenda. Again, our agenda was centered on a simple concept, that we should take a fresh look at the Commission's rules to see if they made sense in light of new technologies and circumstances. We began by examining our small cell rules. Small cells didn't really exist when the Commission originally came up with its review process for infrastructure. The environmental and historic preservation rules in place were written for 200-foot macro towers. Applying all those rules to small cells imposed delays and costs on providers' efforts to densify their networks and keep up with demand. And so in March of 2018, we created a tighter shot clock on review of small cells, and we cut unnecessary fees. We followed up the March order with one in September that imposed reasonable limits on local government review of small cells. Fees and conditions that stifled small cell deployment were eliminated. By the way, we were sued for both of those actions, as we often are at the FCC, and the courts substantially upheld our orders such that they're now the law of the land. We then turned to macro towers because although small cells are vital to densification and high-band signals, macros will anchor 5G coverage across much of this country. 5G likely will alter macros by requiring some more space on towers and the pads beneath. And that's a result of new antennas and more bands being put into service on these macro towers. That's also due to the mobile edge computing and other value-added services that providers are exploring that have to be placed near users to reduce latency. And even outside of 5G, customers are demanding more robust and resilient service, with the public safety community in particular pushing for more backup power on tower sites. Now, recognizing these trends, we worked with state historic preservation officers and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to allow modest tower site expansion without additional unnecessary reviews. And at the FCC's next meeting, we will approve another part of our wireless infrastructure agenda by adopting new rules implementing Section 6409. The last 5G ingredient missing is the most important: the people. The growing 5G workforce is full of computer scientists and RF engineers. They are the ones who use the 5G platform being built to make our lives better. The startup founders, the next big thing folks. But all of those jobs, all of the services and inventions and economic growth wouldn't exist without the people who build 5G with their hands. I first got the chance to spend time with some tower techs when I started climbing towers about 3 years ago. Spending time with these crews may be the single biggest highlight of my time as a commissioner. I've noticed some common characteristics in that time. Tower techs tend to be humble people. They usually were in another line of work before starting to build towers. They're drawn to building something tangible, something they can point to from miles away and say proudly, "I built that." They're not afraid of living up in the air or of a really hard day of work. And most importantly, they get the satisfaction of knowing the things they build help their communities. They may work with power drills and wrenches, but they deliver healthcare, education, job opportunities, and connections to families far away. Through this pandemic, more than ever, we should remember and thank the women and men whose work keeps us connected. Their stories often inspire. So many I've met struggled before climbing towers, but with just a few weeks of affordable training, they can get jobs and earn while they learn. If they stick with it, the job gives them a clear path up to the middle class and without the need for an expensive 4-year degree. There's now more work than workers because of the 5G boom that we've all helped foster. To help close this gap, I partnered with industry on a jobs initiative. We took expertise in curriculum from Aiken Technical College, where the first tower tech program of its kind was started. We then brought together leaders in academia and industry to see if that success could be replicated elsewhere. Southeast Tech in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, launched a program springing from these efforts. So did Wake Tech in North Carolina, and there are more in the pipeline. Spectrum, infrastructure, people, these are the 3 priorities we focused on at the FCC over the past few years. Those efforts resulted in policy wins, but the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. What are the 5G results? How do we measure the strength of America's 5G platform? What are we doing for our constituents and customers? After a nearly 4-year sprint, it's worth taking just a moment to pause and assess. And so I want to close with the state of 5G in America as I see it. 4 years ago, the experts told us that we were falling behind, that America was the undisputed champion of 4G, but we would be handing the wireless crown to China in short order. China had triple the sites per capita that the US had. Our deployment costs were nearly 3 times China's. And Deloitte told us that China and other countries may be creating, in their words, a 5G tsunami, making it near impossible to catch up. But things have changed, things have turned around. With reforms that powered investment, America's private sector built more than 46,000 towers in 2019 alone, with the pace of construction increasing every year since the current FCC leadership took charge. Wireless providers invested more than $29 billion last year in infrastructure, a 4-year high and 4 times China's per capita investment. That has resulted in America building cell sites at more than 6 times the per capita rate of China. Today, America has the strongest 5G platform in the world. We have the home, internet, and 5G handsets to use it. We are well positioned to dominate the wireless economy in 5G like we did in 4G, but to do so, we should redouble the determination, the strategies, and the leadership that have helped bring us these successes. Thank you, CTIA, for the opportunity to share these results with you today. Thank you to the wireless innovators for serving our fellow Americans. It was great to join you.